resound with the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. March on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, to the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn has died, yet with a steady beat and not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers died. We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughter, out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast by Thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met Thee. Lest our hearts, drunk of the wine of the world, we forget Thee. Shadowed beneath Thy hand, may we forever stand. True to our God, true to our God, true to our
Baba wetu sezulwini.
Celebrate Black History Month with us as we explore the continent of Africa and her rich heritage. Each Sunday in February, immediately following Sunday school, we'll introduce the congregation to Africa as seen through the eyes of Central's members and friends. Join us as we return to our roots, highlight our history, and expose our younger generations to the sacrifices our ancestors made during their struggle for civil rights. Additionally, Brother Anthony Wutoh will be with us for our Black History Month program, Sunday, February the 26th, immediately following morning worship. You don't want to miss our pictorial display, slideshow presentations, gifts, and conversation about Africa. Sunday school begins at 9 a.m., followed by worship service at 10:30. We'd love for you to join us, so stop on by. Bonjour, monsieur and mes frères. That's how we greeted people over in France and how we greeted people in Abidjan. Black History Month, for this Black History Month, we're looking at Africa. We're looking at Africa through the eyes of members of the Church of Christ here at Central. Various members have traveled to Africa and did various things. I'm being one of them, and I'll start off. I went to Africa 20 years ago, and I was there just before the civil unrest started in Abidjan. Abidjan is the city, the country itself is Côte d'Ivoire, the continent is Africa. This is just a picture of where we were. It's a poor country. It's Church of Christ is everywhere. There's multiple churches of Christ influenced by missionary teams. They were established by missionary teams. They were established by certain churches in France and in England and in the United States. The primary language there is French. There are other sub-languages there, about 27 different languages. Côte d'Ivoire is in between Ghana and Sierra Leone. They have many refugees that fled Liberia and Sierra Leone because of civil unrest. So when you walk the streets of Abidjan, you can go through the highways. There's tons of people walking along the highways and who's camped out along the highways. The streets are just crowded. And of course, with all those people there, unemployment is high. The average income back then, I don't know what it is back then, but today the average income is less than $22,000 per year. There's a lot of theft. It's not recommended that people travel there today because of unrest, crooked police, crooked government, and just and even slavery. They have problems with child slavery, especially in the factories, M&M factory, Hershey factory. What they do is they employ children to do cocoa beans. Our cocoa comes from the primary source of revenue for Abidjan or Côte d'Ivoire is the cocoa bean. They employ children and don't pay them. So we consider that slavery. So it's very careful. You gotta be very careful. People will try to rob you, try to steal from you. I had 2 attempts and just thank the Lord, he was with me. But just simple things. One guy wanted to shine my shoes and I had on sandals. I said no. The authorities pulled me aside at the airport when I was leaving Abidjan. They wanted to search my bags. They went through everything that I had, looking for money and stuff like that. And the man said, "I know you got to be money. You look rich." And it looks so deceiving. But I did have money, and I had a lot of money. I guess where I had it? In my Bible. They never went in my Bible. And, so that was just God just blessing me. I knew to hide, you hide your properties and don't bring anything valuable. So it was a lesson learned. And so I tried to call the authorities on the authority. And of course, they took my camera and took the film out of my camera because I was taking pictures of people who were doing stuff to me. And while in that country, we were stopped like 3 times. We were driving in the car. They could see that you probably look foreign or that you look like you weren't from there. They would just pull us over. What are you guys doing here? We were there for missionary work. And, what's happening? So it was just sort of just different. It has improved. Telecommunication has improved. And things are a little different now, but it's still just a place full of crime. Children, it's a learned behavior. Because we're poor, they learn how to steal and to trick, do trickery and stuff like that. So, okay, am I hitting something? Okay, so we got Cote d'Ivoire. That's a map of what it looks like. This is some of the houses. Some of the people still live in rural areas. There's plenty of coconut trees, banana plants, cocoa bean, peas. They live off the land. So this is where some of the members live. And of course, you hear villages. People live in the city, in the center of a city or location. And that's where the majority of the activity happens. You find people selling things, people live, they play checkers, they play chess, they read books, they wash clothes, they do all kind of activities in front of you. And so it's kind of just interesting to watch them, and that's like the center of the village. When I went 20 years ago, this was the communication they had. That was where they had telephones and a computer. So it was just something very small in the center. People who made big profit are plastic bags. Everybody has plastic bags. No suitcases. Everybody has, the ones we're banding here in Baltimore. Everybody has plastic bags and everybody has flip-flops. Everybody has flip-flops, tons of flip-flops. First of all, it's hot. When I was there, it was 125 degrees during the day. At night, it'd be 105 or 100. So it was really hot. Their cold month is in August, and when we say cold, we're talking about 82. Here's a lady that was in the center. She was selling coconuts and peas. They're very proud people. They all speak French. Those that make it to high school and go to college will learn English, but they consider French to be their primary language and their preferred language. This is Poor-Boyer Church of Christ. We went to 5 different churches of Christ that were already established. Low membership. We provided, sort of like we do a gospel meeting. There was a meeting every night, and during the day it was like Vacation Bible School. My function was to teach them songs, and to be a silent partner, turning the Bible and stuff like that. And so it was a great experience. You learn a lot. They sing the songs that we sing. They just sing it in French or what language they had. Everywhere we went, we had 2 interpreters. One was French, and one spoke another language that was native to that specific area or that specific village. This is the outside of the church building. Of course, it's crowded. When they hear there was some Americans there, everybody started coming out, and especially the children. Children came and didn't necessarily sit in, but they hung around outside. This is what it's like inside, people singing and fellowshipping, worshiping. This was the minister. Brother Toure was the minister of Poor-Boyer Church of Christ. A lot of times if you listen to them say Poor-Boyer, it sounds like they're saying poor boy. And it's, but it's how they speak and what it sounds like to me. This is his children. This is Brother Gwen. He was speaking one night well, several nights. And this is one of the interpreters who's right beside him. This is the front of the building. So they have a lesson that was planned, and then it was question and answers. And there were a lot of questions. The civil unrest that occurred in that year, that was 2002, was primarily for religion. They were introducing Muslims. The Muslim religion was taking over, and they wanted it to be the predominant religion. The percentage was 43% Muslims, 31% Christianity, and the rest were just non-affiliations at all. These are the two interpreters. The one on the right was French, and the one on the left was Willie. Okay, they're doing the collection. I will continue. Before we went out in the streets every morning. We ate breakfast, then went out on the streets door knocking, or with me, I was inside doing like vacation Bible school kind of thing. The brothers would get together and pray. It wasn't many brothers, it was more women than, just like any other church. So they get together and pray. These were the children that who were just outside, just listening and paying attention. These are some of the children, going kind of fast here. These are the children of the church. Of course, when children are involved, children attract other children. And, so if they see one child coming, they all would come. We had a baptism. We went and baptized them down. It's a beach, and down, it was called a lagoon. Baptized them in the lagoon, and everybody came out to watch it because it was something different. They're familiar with baptism, and so it was kind of interesting. Question and answers period got kind of heated sometimes. People had different ideas. They were trained differently. All kind of religions went to the city and and influenced others. And people had questions about what they were taught. Some of them believed firmly that what they were taught was right and not what the Church of Christ was teaching. One of the nights, people from Apostolic Anabaptist Church came. They had questions. Well, you come and tell our church. So the next day, when they had church service, we went to their church and sat through their church service, and then it was question and answered, and it was just a little difficult because the interpreting. We had two different people interpreting, somebody speaking English, and we're not sure if everybody really got everything. I'm not quite sure how beneficial it was, but that's what happened. But they ended up having Bible studies with two guys, and one even became a member of the church, a young guy. And it's the children. This is Modest Church of Christ. This is really in like kind of the jungle. It borders the Atlantic Ocean. It's the southern part of Abidjan. These are the members. The church building itself didn't have lights. They baptized in the ocean. You can kind of see that's the church building made out of hay and straw and stuff. And let me see if you can see the top. Oops. So that's an example of how the church building was. They did have communion. They all had podiums, and they had communion. They took a collection. These are some of your brothers and sisters in Africa. This is another part of Côte Abidjan. This is the northwest part, and this part was more deserty. And my pictures, some of my pictures are gone because they were confiscated. But this is the minister. His hair got cut off. Sorry, and that's his wife. The minister was named Simeon. And that's his wife and his two children. They had plastic chairs. They didn't have any Bibles. We did come home and mail Bibles in French back to them. This is just In Abidjan, of course, you know, there's not many people have washers and dryers. This is men washing their clothes in the river. They have certain days where men wash clothes and when women wash clothes. And so this is an example of the men washing their clothes. It was just amazing, a lot of clothes. That's me. That's how I looked 20 years ago. The significance of that picture is behind me is the river. That's where the ships the vessels carry the cocoa bean. Cocoa bean, nuts, walnuts, peanuts, pecans, and peas. That's me. I stayed at an American hotel. Thank goodness the food was delicious. Hotel Sofitel in Abidjan. And that's my 2 cents on my trip to Africa. Yeah, thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Did you ever get your camera back?
I got the camera, but not the film. Yeah. Yes. It was boards. It was like bamboo boards, and they like scrub, like, you know, sort of like the washboard. It was like hard bamboo. Brother Good.
You know, with Africa, we always have a picture of elephants and lions.
Mm-hmm.
You see any elephants and lions?
I believe in that. No elephants, no lions, some monkeys. But the thing is, they do have them. They just weren't where we were. Of course, Ghana and Ivory Coast is known for slave trade. You know, a lot of slaves left, you know, came to what they call the point of no return. And that was one of the places there. But the problem we're dealing with today is, of course, it's still got civil unrest. The Church of Christ is, of course, struggling. You know, probably not only financially, but because of the government. And so if you go to Africa, there's a lot of places you can go. And this week, we're going to share with you Africa through many members' eyes. There's parts of Africa that are rich, full of wonderful things, and then there's some that aren't, you know, so. But we're going to show you this week our great heritage. Yes, Brother Stewart.
My question would be to you, since you've been there, is there anything in place that y'all institute anything in place where when you come back, we as their brothers want to help out the churches of Christ? Is there anything institute or anything in place where we can help? So y'all come back and you know, we can help.
Okay. Yes, I understand the question. Is there stuff we can do today, or do we help? Yes, there's multiple churches of Christ that help people in Africa. Even Central helps a congregation in Africa, just not where I went. We do Ghana. And Cameroon and Ghana. So it's, you know, different places where the Church of Christ is effective today in helping others. It's just that this place, because of the language, that made a difference. You know, everything is French or a language that people aren't familiar with. I saw one more question, and then I'm going to wrap it up. Yes?
Yes, to piggyback on what Sister Hannah said when they was washing the clothes, what type of washing agents did they use to clean?
I didn't get that close to see if they do have detergent. You know, I know in the stores they had detergent, but basically they were just using the water, the fresh water. I mean, the water looked muddy and dirty, but, you know, it was still fresh water. It kept flowing. So, yes?
You mentioned that they had child slavery, and you
Yes.
also mentioned they had high unemployment.
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out how the adults did not take the place of the children. Is it captivity with children in captivity, and while the adults sat outside and did not work or unemployed?
I don't know the answer fully. My assumption is The average lifespan is 60. The people live to be 60 there. The adults are trying to make their own money. Children could work. The adults couldn't. You know, they had arthritis. They had different ailments that prevented them from really working. But you know, children, a lot of the children, people had multiple children, so they would grab their children and take their children, enslave their children. And right now, several makers make chocolate here for the world. Lidl's, we're familiar with Lidl's, and what's the other one up the street? Aldi. Aldi is known as 100% slave-free, whereas Hershey and M&M are still guilty of employing children and not paying them. So it's just it's just a different world. So we're just thankful for the freedoms that we have here in the United States, Brother Rupert.
Next Sunday, speaker.
Okay, next Sunday we're going to have Sister Paige. She's going to be talking about Senegal, and we're going to have Sister Vanderpuije talking about Ghana. Of course, you know, she just recently went there and came back, and she grew up there. And then the following Sunday, we'll have a guest speaker from Brother Wutoh, Dr. Wutoh. He's the provost of the School of Pharmacy at Howard University. And he'll be speaking. He's led several trips to Africa for AIDS research and AIDS awareness. He's been there for different health things. He came from a family of doctors. He was a member here at Central for many years, and he's returning to speak to us last Sunday of the month, following morning worship. He'll be our keynote speaker. So be sure to stop downstairs, take a look at the photos, engage us in conversation if you like. We're going to have some music. We're going to have some photos, slideshows, just so you can be familiar with Africa. And we're encouraging you to invest in knowing where did you come from. You know, what's my heritage? Where did I come from? Who am I part of? And you'll find out most of us are mixed. You know, we got various backgrounds. And we're going to be encouraging and sending out literature to help you to do that. You know, it helps to know who we are, because it's where we came from and where we're going. Thank you very much.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. Central Church of Christ, Sister Good, Brother Good. I would like to share with you my trip to Senegal, West Africa. I left here December of 2022, returned January 2023. After COVID hit the United States, I found myself not traveling. I am a person that goes somewhere every month, fly somewhere every month, do something. And 3 years sitting in the house, I became, I don't know, I was afraid to travel by myself or to go anywhere. Okay, when everyone was traveling, I was nervous and to begin to travel. And looked like where people were going, they was coming back with the COVID. And I didn't want to go there. So my daughter, who lives in Georgia, mentioned she was going to Africa. I said, I want to go. She said, okay. She took care of everything except my vaccines. My daughter took African ancestry test 7 years ago. The results report that my mother's maternal line up to 2,000 years are Pacific to the Mandinka people living in Senegal. My daughter, two of her friends, we took a 15-hour flight spending over 2 days in Senegal. We visited the African Renaissance Museum that is taller than the Statue of Liberty. And it's 198 steps from the bottom to the top. I did it. And it commemorates 50 years of independence from France. Senegal is on the west coast of Africa on the Atlantic Ocean. It borders Mali and Guinea. My daughter discussed with a friend of hers, Perin, France, who travels frequently to Senegal for research and connection to her lineage. She is the seventh great-granddaughter to Anne Tinsley, who was enslaved and sold in Cuba to a plantation owner and slave trader who purchased her as his wife to Amelia Island, Jacksonville, Florida, where she became a slave owner and a planter. My daughter and Perry discussed all the sights she wanted me to see, experiences on my first journey to the motherland. They connected with long-time mentors and a guide to curate the travel experiences. Still in Dakar, we visit museums, the African civilization, the grandest and the most modern in the region. It aims to celebrate Black civilization, the cradle of humanity, the continental Africa civilization, globalization of Blackness, and now Africa. The Craft Villages is a portal to the Senegal's art, selling all kinds of arts and objects. Gorée Island. We caught a ferry to Gorée Island January the 1st. It's a car-free island off the coast of Senegal. The island is known for the role it played in the 15th to the 19th century in the Atlantic slave trade on narrow streets. This 45-acre played a significant part in the early days of the African history in the Americas. An estimated 20 million Africans passed through the island. It was a warehouse to hold these enslaved, a center for trade in African men and women and children. They were sold in South America, the Caribbean, and North America to create a new world. The door of no return, which is on Gorée Island. This door led to a wooden wharf used for loading the captives onto the slave ships by a plank. As the enslaved men and women were led through the doors up the plank, they were shackled in pairs, each with 3-pound iron balls attached to his or her legs. Those who tried to escape would drag or drown themselves and whomever was with them. After 2 days in Dakar, Senegal, and a 4-hour drive to Toubacouta, and 1 boat ride to Sipo Island on the 3rd of January, my daughter and I, we reconnected with Al Lineage and be named from our Mandinka heritage. My daughter was given the name Benta Toure, my name Jenaba Toure. Mandinka descendants of Mali Empire migrated from the Niger River. Their language, Senegal is a multilingual country, 36 language. French due to the colonization. The clothing, because it's Islam, is a predominant religion in that country. Conservative wearing their custom clothing, you see Western and Europe styles. The homes, the Mandinkas live in a family-related compound in a traditional rural village led by a chief or a group of elders. The food, I think because of Islam country, we saw no pork on the menu. Lamb, octopus, clams, scallops, mussels, and shrimp, grilled chicken, and juices. Thank you for listening to my trip. Any questions?
Go back to the picture with the 2 lines. Is that you, Sister Paige?
Yes. We went on a lion walk, and it's a video flying around here with me, with them moving. People asked me, was I afraid? I told them, no, I go to Central Church of Christ. They teach me. we lean on the word of God. And just like God made them lions and he made me, we cool. And after I had to sign a waiver. And to walk with the lions, you couldn't wear no dangly jewelry. You couldn't wear no flowy clothes. You couldn't have no long, if you had braids, you had to twist them and stick them down in your blouse or something. And you could not crouch or wear animal prints. And you can't see the keepers because, you know, they're taking the pictures and everything. But I was so calm. I mean, like, you trained them. You say you trained them. I trained my dog. I tell you it ain't gonna bite, it ain't gonna bite, you know. So, yeah, Sister Harris. In the mornings when I got up, it was cold here. It was a lovely 79 degrees.
Sister Paige, you shared that you were skeptical of traveling after being in the house for 3 years. Was there anything in particular about Africa itself,
Oh,
to your
Africa.
going, that made it click for you that it was okay to go during the pandemic?
My daughter had went 4 other times. So I felt comfortable because she had went and she knew stuff and she knew people. And I was good with that. And when I asked our tour guide, I'm like, I'm from Baltimore. How's the crime over here? They said, it's low, low. The crime is low over there. The police, some polices carry guns, some don't. So when they said the crime was low, oh, everything just dropped off of me and I was good, you know, and I just walked around. I liked going through some of the villages and seeing children just playing with a can and they were happy. You know, I haven't seen that in a long while. We went to Dakar, I got my eyes on the clock. We went to Dakar University, and I noticed trees. They were whitewashed. I don't know if anybody remember whitewashing trees, but my grandfather used to do it, and I haven't seen it in a long while. So I asked them, what's up with the whitewashing trees? So that, they didn't know, but that made me think, where did my grandfather get it from? Some of them people in Africa has never been to the United States, but I see them getting cabs like this. Where they get that from? Where we get that from? You know, it was so many things over there, and that it was like, where they get that from? Where we get that from? But, you know, it was lovely. I had to get a shot for yellow fever. That's the babo tree, and that's on Mandinka Island. And they say, when you walk up to it, you put your left hand on it and make 3 wishes. Okay. Okay. And that's the island where the Mandinka tribe live on. And it's like 45 acres, and that's in the Museum of Civilization that was just dedicated like in 1966. It is beautiful over there. So any more questions? Because Africa is not what you know, when we was in school, Tarzan, it ain't like that. The bone through the nose, it ain't like that. I was walking, we was on the beach. Where you go, that's the door of no return. That's Goree Island. So can you imagine the slaves standing there knowing that they ain't coming back this way? They're going that way. And then they gotta walk up a plank to get on a ship with a 3-pound iron ball. Not like none of them 3 pounds that we lift in the gym. This was a 3-pound iron ball. There it is. They had that shackled around them. And on Goree Island, it was kind of sad, you know? It was a feeling like, you know, you knew somebody in your bloodline came through here, had to endure all of this, not knowing anything. Mothers and children were separated, and that's my ancestors, my mother, my grandmother, her mother, and so on. It's just I wish I had went years ago, and I'm gonna try and go again and again and again. But this time it won't take no 15 hours. My daughter, I guess she thought she wasn't sure if I could do it. So we flew to Paris, France. That was a plus because I seen the Eiffel Tower and the Arch of Triomphe. And then we flew to Africa. Any more questions before I take my seat? Thank you for letting me share my trip.
The results as you take us on your journey. What were your findings from Ancestry.com, and were they consistent with what you know about your heritage?
The findings from Ancestry.com were consistent. There's Ghana, there's Ivory Coast, and Benin and Togo. That I'm not too sure because I have not asked my father yet. And also the percentage for the Jewish heritage.
Thank you. And I see your pictures represent your roots in Africa, in Ghana. Can you share with us who those people are?
Okay. The upper right is my grandmother and grandfather's wedding, my paternal grandparents, and that was in 1929. To the right of them is my grandmother, my mother's mother, who's currently at 107 years old, Patience Mercy Northey. And then there's a picture of Matilda Wu Vanderpuije, my paternal grandmother. That's my mom, Sister Georgina Limo. In the middle, we were at the Church of Christ over at Chalet Boutre. And that's my mom, myself, my sister, and my niece. And the rest of the pictures are extended family members and my mom and my grandmother again.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Tell us about your coming to America. When did you come and why? And how old were you?
I came to the US in 1975. I was 12 and came to New York and came to be with my father.
Okay. And at what point did you bring your mother to America?
My mother came in 2007. I started her process in 2000 and she eventually came in May of 2007.
All right. I understand you returned to Ghana in 2022 with your mother. Was that your first time back?
No, my first time back was in 1980. I went again in 97, and most recent is in 2022.
And why did you return in 2022?
To see my grandmother, my mom's mom, who's currently at 107, and she also had the yearning to see us, so we wanted to go and see her and then see the rest of the family.
Wonderful. Tell us about your trip. How was your trip from Baltimore to Ghana?
We had a beautiful trip, thanks to God. We left BWI to JFK, New York, and then from New York to Accra, Ghana. And the flight is about 9 hours and 50 minutes from JFK to Ghana.
What were your expectations as you prepared for your trip? Were you concerned about what you would find?
I did not have any concerns. I was just looking forward to seeing the family. And God so good, He granted us that trip, a safe trip, a beautiful trip. No issues, no problems, and we were able to get there.
Can you describe your emotions when you finally arrived back home?
Gratefulness to God for giving us safe travels. And we just couldn't wait to get out and to see the family.
What about your mom, Sister Alamo?
My mom, once she got out of the gate and saw my niece, she started crying about her sister Elizabeth who passed. And I knew my mother was going to be emotional, but I didn't know it was just going to be just as soon as we got out.
What changes did you immediately notice when you arrived?
We were at the newest airport, newest international airport versus the old one that I used to travel to and from. And so everything was modern, new. We didn't have to get out of the plane and go through the tarmac. We actually just got out straight into the building.
Renovated, new airports, those are always nice. What would you like for us to know about your country, Ghana? The people, the food, and perhaps the economy?
That is a beautiful country, delicious foods, and it's beautiful to travel and get to know new places. God made this whole entire earth. Why not get to know someplace new? The people are very nice, they're welcoming, very friendly, and there's nobody who's really a stranger per se. We see everybody as family.
And the food?
The food is delicious. I had a great time eating.
Well, did you have a favorite while you were there?
I like jollof rice, and I like this dish is called wache, which is black eyed peas made with rice, and you can eat it with stew, or we can use it with fried pepper, fish, chicken, whatever you want to eat with it. I enjoy that.
And the economy?
The economy is just the same, I think, as anywhere. You know, you have those who are making it, those who are complaining about prices being very high, like everywhere else, and gas prices, but other than that, people are making it.
Although you were home visiting family, did you have an opportunity to do some sightseeing while there?
I did. I went to Cape Coast Castle, a castle that was a former slave castle. Because of history that I've learned here, I know as a child in Ghana, I didn't even know anything about slavery. And so from what I know here, I wanted to go and see this place that is in my country. I knew of Cape Coast always, but I just never knew about the slave castle.
And what was your experience at Cape Coast Castle? What were some of the things you saw there?
We went through the dungeons where the slaves were kept. We went through the whole castle, the upstairs where the people who oversaw the slave trade lived. It was nice to see other people traveling and coming to tour. Yeah, I met some family members, not my family, but people who were family from Oregon. And there were other African people from other places that were there to take the tour.
What were one of the sights that stood out to you at the castle?
I think there was a jail within the dungeon. And if anyone tried to escape, they put them there. There is no windows, there's no air, it's just dark. And you stay there until you die. And when the tour guide told us that, if, for example, they had two people in there, when one person dies, they don't remove the body. They keep you in there until the other person also dies, then they remove the bodies.
And the bodies were buried?
You know what, he did not say, at least I don't remember what he said they did with the body, but they did that to show the other captives, you know, if you try to escape, this is what can happen to you.
Do you know if any of your ancestors were enslaved?
That I do not know, but what I did find shocking, or something that is hard to wrap my brain around, when the tour guide was done, and we were at the bookstore, he had talked about all the different descendants from the people who were there, and he mentioned the Vanderpuijes, the Vandermans, and other names. And I'm familiar with the Vanderpuije, of course, because I'm a Vanderpuije, and I'm familiar with the Vandermans. So when I came back, I called my dad and asked him about the Vanderpuijes from Cape Coast, and asked him if we were related to any of them. And he said, yes, there were some Vanderpuijes that were related to, but they were not part of the slave trade. What they did in Cape Coast was to export cocoa. But there are three different spellings of Vanderpuijes. You have the P-U-I-J-E, like our name, and then there's the P-O-Y-E and P-U-Y-E. Those we are not related to. But all the Vanderpuijes that are spelled with P-U-I-J are related.
Okay, okay. So at the castle, there was also the dungeon and the graveyard, and then the tour guide also took you to the that infamous door. Can you tell us about that?
The door of no return, which is the last door the captives will walk through to get to the ships, and that, of course, they never return back, and that's what's called the door of no return.
Wow. gives me chills hearing about it, even seeing the pictures.
Yes, I had to prepare myself to go. I had to really talk to myself because I didn't know. I knew what to expect or anticipate, but I didn't know how I would feel. And walking through it, I really can't describe the feeling, but it's a numbness for me that I felt. And I remember my cousin, I'm not sure exactly how she felt. I could hear her comments, and I knew she was experiencing the same thing because you just can't imagine the horror that people went through. To get to the other side, yeah.
Yes, yes. Yes. On another note, did you bring back any souvenirs from the castle or from Ghana?
From the castle, I purchased a book from Ghana. I purchased a handbag from the merchants that were there, and a few things, and what you call those things? And a picture.
Okay. A picture.
It's a drawing on a canvas.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. How was your return trip to America?
It was a little hard to leave the family, very emotional. But again, thank God the flight was peaceful. It was straight. We flew to JFK again, and then from JFK to BWI.
And you've been back for over a month now. Have you had an opportunity to reflect on your visit?
I think about my visit a lot, especially the time I spent with my family. How I wish I could be there with them, and I look forward to eventually going back again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Sister Vanderpuije, for sharing not only your journey to Ghana with us, but also your family. Your story gives us a great appreciation for the African part of African American. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Sister Wutoh.
Good morning, church. Let me take this up. It is truly my pleasure to share Ghana with you. I have been in this country for 47 years. So, and this year will actually be 48 for me. And so, Brother Tinsley is going to go ahead and show you some pictures. This is the map of Ghana. I'm from Accra. As you can see, it's the very southern part of Ghana, and that's the capital city. And population is about just over 2.5 million. This is my mom and I on our flight to Ghana. Go back. And as you all know, this is my grandmother, my mom's mom. I'm just so thankful of the blessing that God has allowed her to live 107 years. And we still have her. She's beautiful, she's very sweet, and I just love the way she loves me, just the way I need to be loved. This is my mom, Sister Alimo, and she's very happy to be home with her mom and the rest of the family. So my mom is 82. Mom is 82. She'll be 83 this year. And she always sends her love every time I talk to her. I spoke to her yesterday. She sends her love to everybody. This is the day we got home from the airport. The rest of the family, nieces, nephews, my brother, my sister, and my cousin. And we worshiped at the Church of Christ at Ashale Botre. I always have to say that name slowly. And they were very welcoming. Most of the worship is done in Twi, which is an Akan language. But because we were there, they did a portion of it in Twi and a portion of it in English. And that's just, okay, we're going back. This is my father's house that is currently under construction. And pray for him, please, because he really needs to return, because my father's 87 now, and I worry about him a lot. He's in New York, yes. This is a view from his window of the town that he's in. It's called Wutoh, and that's just the other houses on the hills from his window. Okay. We went to a restaurant called the Sandbox at the beach. This is the food that we ordered, some oxtail, and some penne and shrimp. I think it's, I want to say 180 cities, which is probably like maybe $18 or less. And this is my niece. She's the one on the left. The school had a fashion show. This is the picture of the slave castle at Cape Coast, and I took that picture from the beach side. And this is the upstairs of the castle. From a window, took a picture of the town. It looks to be a lot of fishermen out there, a lot of seaboats. But when you first enter into the city, it looks very quaint, and it looks very historical. And with the smaller and narrow roads. This is the beach at Cape Coast. It's just right outside the castle. And I took some rocks from there, so I brought them with me. Okay. This is the tour guide. Unfortunately, I don't remember his name, but he was very nice and very knowledgeable. This is the dungeons of the castle that's underneath. I cannot really describe the feeling, but there's a lot of sadness, there's pain, there's hurt, there's sympathy, empathy. At least I felt all those things. Just to think of the things that people went through. These were human beings, and to think of what they went through. This is the door of no return. So this will be the last place they entered to get onto the ships. There's a church that is on the site of the castle. And right now it is turned into a children's library. And that's the group that restored it. And the library is open a few days a week. I'm sorry, I have to go a little closer. It's the Zeta Phi Beta sorority that takes care of that library. This is a picture of my grandma, myself, and my mom in '97. This was the night I was returning from Ghana to New York. I was living in New York City at the time. So I just wanted to, and I know with the slavery and everything else that I've learned here, because slavery was not taught when I was in school, but then again, I was in elementary school. So I don't know if I had stayed and gone to school further, maybe I would have learned something from it, but I knew nothing about slavery until I came here. And so it was just wonderful to go to the slavery castle and see what you always read about in history, to actually be there. It was something. It really, but I look forward to going back. I may make a trip again because I really want to see the town. And there's another slave castle, which was about an hour away, called Elamina Castle, and I like to go there too. Thank you so very much. If you have any questions, yes. To get to the castle? The flight is just like 10 hours or less, depending on which direction they go, but it's anywhere from 9 hours and 50 minutes for the flight. So you flew out of where? I flew out of BWI to New York, from New York to Ghana. Sister Carla?
Were the castles built specifically for the slave trade, or did they already exist from before?
The castle was originally built for exporting in 1600 by Sweden. But the British took over, and that's when the slave trade started, when the British took over. You're welcome. Hello, sister.
Is there any
In the city itself, I was not aware of any crime, but anywhere you go, and there's a lot of tourists, you do want to be careful. Yes. Brother Stewart? I'm sorry.
Yes, sis, first and foremost, I thank God for you, and I thank God for blessing you to show us what you are showing us. And two-part question, sweetheart. I'd like to know, how old did you say your grandmother was?
My grandmother?
Yes.
She's 107.
107?
Yes.
Okay. And then I would just like to ask you again, I know you talked about the pain and everything, right? And being blessed to know where you come from and to see it from your point of view, right? And I just want to just ask you, you know, when you talk about the pain, love, it's everything involved, you know what I mean? And I know it's got to be focused and centered around God and how blessed you are to be where you are, you know.
I'm talking about the pain going through the castle.
Yes.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay, the pain and going through and what they endured, what they went through.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Wait a minute, you say you're talking about the pain of going through the castle, right? And what they had to endure, what they had to go through, right?
Well, the captives have to endure, because the tour guide, he's very detailed. And when you walk through, it's very dark. It has light now because they put light in for the tourists. But it's very dark, and it's like close quarters. They had a section for the females and a section for the males. But just imagining having to endure that is very tough. And they were bonded. Right, and you have to remember too, they're bound, they're in chains. It's not comfortable. You're pretty much sitting in your own waste. So yeah. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Sister Paige?
Yes. What was the temperature there? And how many hours different in time from the United States and over in Ghana? And the next time you go to Ghana, I'm going to be going with you.
The temperature daily was in the 80s, and then there's some days when it gets very hot, but it was mostly in the 80s. The time difference now is 5 hours. Ghana's ahead of us 5 hours. When we spring back or spring forward, what we do? Well, we go forward, and it'll be 4 hours difference. But in the fall, when we fall back, it's 5, and then spring forward, it's 4 hours difference. But as much time as I tell my family that, they don't care. They just pick up the phone and call. So I can get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning. I can get a text at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's like, look, oh, but it's 11 o'clock here. But it's not 11 o'clock over here. Okay, any more questions? Thank you so very much, church. Sister Paige has another question. Say that again. The area where I was, I really didn't have much of a problem with the mosquitoes, but then my cousin always sprays. But I mean, here and there you might get a bite here and there, but it wasn't as bad as it's been previously. Yeah.
Was COVID bad over there?
Actually, no. COVID, because of the strictness of the government, COVID was not as bad. But we had to fill our medical forms before we left here, and our temperatures had to be checked before we boarded the plane to Ghana in New York. Some people, well, we wore masks in the plane. Some people did, some people did not. But once we got home and we got settled, it was too hot to wear a mask, so I didn't wear a mask. But I came back, I did seasonal work at Macy's and got COVID. Say that again. I did some seasonal work at Macy's and actually got COVID working at Macy's. But I didn't have any issue with COVID in Ghana. Yeah. Okay. Oh, Brother Goodwin?
I know for your mother's mother, maybe your mother, I know those difficult days sometimes still come to their mind.
Difficult days?
I said for your mother's mother and maybe your mother, those difficult days still come to their mind sometimes.
What do you mean with those difficult days?
back in
The
the
thing
slave
is, my
time.
mother tells me that even when she was in school, they didn't talk about slavery. It's something they just don't talk about. So she realized slavery once she got here, watching documentaries, watching shows, and she said she remembered a song when she was little, but she never understood the song. But it talks about people floating on water and going on water. That's when she realized that song was about slavery. But it's something that they just don't talk about.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we all good? Are we good? Thank you all so much. Thank you, church.
All right, let me begin by saying welcome. And we want to thank you all for being a part of Central's 2023 Black History Celebration. This year, our theme is Returning to Our Roots, Back to Africa. Today is a celebration of the African roots in African Americans. We begin by saying thank you to those who paved the way and opened many doors for us and for future generations. Lest we forget. Many of us have careers and jobs, attended schools and universities, and live in communities today that we could not have enjoyed prior to the civil rights movement. However, those achievements and opportunities here in America are rooted in our motherland, Africa. Our scriptural text is Deuteronomy 15:13. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. Also, Romans 6:4. Therefore, we are buried with him by baptism into death, that like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also shall walk in newness of life. These scriptures highlight both our history as slaves in America, as well as crossroads that require us to make decisions and choices that impact our lives, individually as Christians, and collectively as a congregation. The objective of our Black History Celebration here at Central is one, to facilitate the learning of our history, to expose the younger generation to the sacrifices of our ancestors and the struggle for civil rights, to gain a greater appreciation for our freedom here in America, evangelism, to introduce others to the Lord's church. We began our journey back to our roots with Sister Paige speaking about Senegal, Sister Vanderpuije about Ghana, Perin Tinsley about Cote d'Ivoire, and sharing their highlights of their trips to Africa. We look forward to our guest speaker, Brother and Sister Wutoh, sharing their experiences as native Ghanaians and as Americans. We begin with some quick facts about Africa. To begin, we have Sister Stephanie Jackson. This is Africa. She's coming forward. Let's give her a round of applause. Mike is coming.
Good afternoon. Africa is the second largest continent after Asia, covering about 1/5 of the total land surface of the earth. The continent is bounded on the west by the Atlantic Ocean and on the north by the Mediterranean Sea, on the east by the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, and on the south by the mingling waters of the Atlantic and the Indian Oceans. The continent is cut almost equally in two by the equator, so that most of Africa lies within a tropical region bounded by the north of the Tropic of Cancer and the south by the Tropic of Capricorn. Because of the bulge formed by the Western African, the greater part of Africa's territory lies north of the equator. Africa is crossed from north to south by the prime meridian, which is at a 0 latitude. In equality, the Greeks are said to have called the continent Liberia, and the Romans have called it Africa, perhaps from the Latin apricae, or meaning sunny, or the Greek Afrite, without cold. The name Africa, however, was chiefly applied to the north coast of the continent, which was in effect regarded as the southern extension of Europe. The Romans, who for a time ruled the North African coast, also said that it was called the area south of the settlements, Africa, the land of the Africans. Africa contains an enormous wealth of minerals, resources, including some of the world's largest reserves of fossil fuel, metallic ores, and gems and precious metals. This richness is matched by the great diversity of the biological resources that include the intensity-lush equator rainforests of the Central Africa, and the most famous population of wildlife on the eastern and southern portions of the continent. Although agriculture, primarily subsistence, still dominates the economy of many African countries, the exploitation of these resources became the most significant economical activity in Africa in the 20th century. Climatic and factors that exert considerably influence on the pattern of human settlement in Africa. While some areas appear to have been inhabited more or less consistently since the dawn of humanity, enormous regions, notably the deserts as far northern or southern Africa, have been largely unoccupied for prolonged periods of time. The Arabs have made the greatest impact. The Islamic religion, which the Arabs carried with them, spread to North Africa into many areas south of the Sahara, so that many Western African people are now largely Islamic, or Islamized, as they say. Africa is now widely reconsidered as the birthplace of the Humanoid, a taxonomic family on which modern humans belong. Archaeologically, evidence indicates that the continent had been inhabited by humans and their forebears for more than 4 million years or more. Economically, modern humans are believed to have appeared early in the 200,000 years ago in the eastern region of sub-Saharan Africa. Somewhere later, those early humans spread into the northern African and Middle Eastern areas, ultimately, and then into the rest of the world. Africa is the most tropical of the continents. As a consequence, the culture and the physical variations of the people reflect adaptation of both hot, dry climate, hot, wet climate. The dark skin is a dominant characteristic of indigenous African people, but the skin color is not uniform. Skin color shows a clinical variation from light to tan color in the northern regions of the continent, which has a Mediterranean climate. The very dark skin is in the Sudanic region of the western and eastern African area, and where the radiation of the sun has been most intense. Africa has the most physically variable population in the world, from the tallest people to the shortest. Body form and facial and other features are widely varied. The greatest majority of the African languages has no ingenious form of writing. Several of them, however, have transcribed in the 20th century by missionary linguistics or native speakers and others. Many African languages, such as Swahili, for centuries, have been written in Arabic script. The best known acceptations of the Arabic writing system are those of the Val and the Liberian or the Saharian Leonons, or the Mum and the Camerons. The Turqua and the Beri people have Southern Saharan, and all the others invented their own scripts of writing. In most of the rest of the sub-Saharan Africans, the practice is varied in traditional religion, which has certain common features. All of these known include the notion of high or creator, God. Most humans and beyond are comprehensive or controlled. That God typically is not attributed to a gender, but in some cases is male or female. Other gods and given in the intimate and visible aspect as well. The most important spiritual powers are usually associated with things and belongings, and the people have a day-to-day contact they know from the past. So they follow historically of the past generations. In the past, unfortunately, witchcraft and sorcery were given widespread continents and served to explain the control of the misformed people of Africa. Travelers that told tales of people living in fear of witchcraft, however, were of course grossly exaggerated. The colonials' power usually assumed, incorrectly, that witch doctors were socially harmful and prohibited them. Although the belief in witchcraft is receding, it is still important in both rural and urban areas. There are many cases of modern times of epidemics on behalf of those witches that they claim were present. Such arise in the periods of race changed and the resulting uncertainties and stress. Domestic groupings. The forms of families found in Africa are consistent with the forms of economic production. Throughout most of the rural areas, tropical domestic groups in a joint or extended families consisting of several generations of kin and their spouses, the whole being under authority or of senior males. The size of the groupings varied, but they typically consisted of 3 to 5 generations of kin and provided a stable and long-lasting domestic unit able to work as a single or cooperative group. And this was their domestic grouping. The major moment, as far as migration, the major movements into the continent in the past few centuries has been European settlers into the north of Africa and European and Asia settlers into the southern African area. The Dutch migration in the southern African began in the mid-1700s. This is just a brief understanding of the historical bounds of the African continent at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Stephanie Jackson. This is Africa. At this time, we're going to ask Brother Winston Smith to come and introduce our guest speaker.
Testing. All right. All right. Dr. Anthony Wutoh is the Provost and Chief Academic Officer at Howard University. Dr. Anthony Wutoh received a Bachelor of Arts degree in biochemistry from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County in 1987. He then completed a Bachelor of Science in Pharmacy and a Doctor of Philosophy and Pharmacy Administration at the University of Maryland, Baltimore School of Pharmacy. Dr. Wutoh has received over $70 million in grant funding from several sources including NIH, CDC, USAID, HRSA, and others. Dr. Wutoh has led and participated in various international programs including sponsored projects in Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and Rwanda, to name a few. Dr. Wutoh has been a practicing pharmacist in Maryland since 1990 and has worked in various settings including hospital, retail, consulting, and community pharmacy, as well as academia. Dr. Wutoh is married to Rita Wutoh, and they are the proud parents of 2 daughters, Nadia and Naya. Brother Wutoh serves as an elder at the Prince George's Church of Christ in Landover, Maryland, where his family has worshiped since 2003. With that being said, let's welcome Brother Wutoh.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm going to ask if my wife will come forward. I want to first thank Brother Winston for that kind introduction. I've recorded it and will send it to my mom right after this. I also want to thank Brother Tinsley and Sister Rudolph for inviting me, and certainly Brother Rupert for allowing us to be here this morning. It's good to be home. I was baptized while I was a student at UMBC, having been taught the gospel by Brother Tony Goodman. And my wife was also baptized here at Central, so wherever we travel, wherever we worship, we have always still considered Central our home. So it's good to see each of you this morning. I did have a PowerPoint presentation. It's not absolutely necessary. If it comes up, then we'll reference it, but if it doesn't, that's fine as well. Probably, one of the things that I'll start with is, and you're aware that Africa is not a country. Africa is a continent. There are over 50 countries throughout Africa. And I'm going to focus a lot of my conversation around Ghana because Ghana is where my family is from. But I'll talk about a few other parts of Africa and some other countries in Africa where we've been able to travel and visit as well. And Brother Rupert had made a point which I'm going to emphasize as well, and that is there are a lot of Bible characters in the scriptures who are from Africa. You just may not know it, and it may not have been brought to your attention. And he mentioned the Ethiopian eunuch, and really it's the Ethiopian eunuch who is credited with taking the gospel to Africa, to Ethiopia, and then to other regions of Africa, really during the 1st century. But you can read in the Old Testament about the Queen of Sheba. The Queen of Sheba is a black woman, is an African woman who came to visit Solomon. And if you read about her visit to Solomon, it says how much gold she brought with her as a gift for Solomon, how many animals and spices and things that were not readily available in Israel. So when you think about gold and immense wealth, if she brought gold with her, it meant that she came from somewhere where there was gold and great wealth. And so when we think about Africa, we a lot of times think about, maybe the commercials you've seen at midnight, watching movies and kids in drought and poverty in Ethiopia. Africa is a rich continent. There's a reason why the Europeans went to colonize Africa. It was primarily for the slaves, but it was also for the great wealth that is in Africa, was in Africa centuries ago, and is still in Africa now. I'll mention one other Bible character, Simon of Cyrene. If you remember, as Jesus was carrying his cross and just was physically so broken down that he stumbled, and the Roman soldiers forced a man to pick up the cross and carry it the rest of the way, and his name is Simon of Cyrene. Cyrene is in modern-day Libya. Simon is an African man who helped to carry the cross up Golgotha's hill for Jesus. As I mentioned, there are other African characters in the scriptures. We just have not always been taught, or the point been made that these are African people or these are black people. And so I just wanted to make that point in terms of our connection to Africa, even in scriptures. So what I wanted to do was to show and a number. So most of the slides are photos. So I'm going to show you pictures, and then I'm going to explain what the context is. If we can go to the next slide. Okay, this is a map of most of Africa. And Africa, again, is a large continent. What I circled in the map of Africa is Ghana. Ghana is on the west coast of Africa, and it is bordered by Côte d'Ivoire on one side, which is French-speaking, by Burkina Faso to the north. We used to call Burkina Faso Upper Volta. Is bordered by Togo to the east, and then to the south is the Atlantic Ocean. Next slide. And I was focusing on Ghana again because that's where my family is from, that's where I was born. My wife's father is also from Ghana. Her mother is from Charleston, South Carolina. And so just a little bit of background about Ghana. The current population in Ghana is about 32 million. The official language is English. I always tell people, if you've never been to Africa before, the two countries I would suggest that you go first are either Ghana or South Africa. And it's because, one, they're English speaking, and so you'll be able to communicate with people easily. Ghanaians are known to be friendly people, and maybe I'm biased, but Ghanaians are known to be friendly people. And the food is fantastic, and we'll talk about the food a little bit. But the former name of Ghana is the Gold Coast. And so again, just to give you an idea of the type of wealth that is in Africa, when Ghana was a British colony, it was called the Gold Coast. The country neighboring Ghana is called the Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire. And again, it just helps give you a sense of where all of this wealth was and the reasons why the Europeans were in Africa in the first place. Ghana gained independence from Great Britain on March 6, 1957. And the reason that is important, we're coming up on Ghanaian Independence Day in about a week or two. I'm currently at Howard University. I'm an administrator at Howard. And we'll be entering our spring break. One of the things that our students have started doing is going, rather than going to Florida and beaches in Texas to party, we have a number of students who do what we call alternative spring break. They'll go all over the US. We have a group that is coming to Baltimore, to Detroit, Flint, Michigan, New Orleans, and they'll volunteer their time to really help in any way they can. It might be in tutoring young people. It might be in renovating or fixing houses. Well, this year, for the first time, we have a group of students who are going to Ghana. And so about 70 Howard students are going to Ghana, and they're going to be volunteering in a number of ways for alternative spring break. When Ghana first gained independence from the British, in 1957, the independence leader and the very first president of Ghana is Kwame Nkrumah. And he was given the name Osajefo by the people. Osajefo is an Akan word which means redeemer. Ghana was the first country, the first African country to get its independence from the colonial masters, and we'll talk about that in a second as well. In terms of religion, almost 75% of Ghanaians are Christian. There are also about 20% that are Muslim. And then we have still a number of people who we would say are traditionalists. They worship the ancestors or they worship nature. But we can talk about that a little bit as well. But even today, the major exports from Ghana are gold, oil, and cocoa. If you eat Hershey bars like I do or Snicker bars, there's a good likelihood that the chocolate you're eating probably came from Ghana. How many of you have been to Hershey Park? If you've been to Hershey Park, I think they still do, but they used to have at the entrance of the park, you could go on a little ride and it tells you the story about where the cocoa comes from. If they still do that, they have cocoa beans throughout. Read the label of the cocoa beans. A lot of them will say from Ghana, that the cocoa came actually from Ghana. Next slide. So I'll actually, before I go there, I'll just mention one more thing about independence. Many people aren't aware of how close Ghana was, especially with many of the civil rights leaders in the 50s and in the 60s. During the Independence Day celebration, there were a lot of African Americans who were in Ghana for Independence Day. Martin Luther King was there. There were a number of Howard's president at the time, Mordecai Wyatt Johnson, was there. And there's a story that while Dr. King was there and was, just sort of amazed that he is in a country, almost everyone is black. You have the black police, and you have blacks in government, and you have black people running the hospitals. And he had an opportunity to meet with Richard Nixon, because Richard Nixon at the time was the vice president of the United States, and he was representing the US delegation. And so Dr. King had a conversation with Richard Nixon and said, when we get back to the States, I'd love to invite you to Alabama so you can meet with the black folk in Alabama who have the same dream of having freedom that we're witnessing the black folk having here in Ghana. But I'll show a couple of slides, and then I'll share some stories about them. For me, obviously everything starts with family. And so I wanted to show some photos of my family and talk a little bit about where my family comes from. The good-looking guy on the left that's my father, Joseph Wutoh. And my father is from a small village in the eastern part of Ghana, in the Volta region, called Taingbe. My father, again, in 1957, when Ghana was first getting independence, he was part of the group of young Ghanaians that they wanted to make sure was well educated. And so because we didn't have formal universities in Ghana at the time, they would send a lot of young people all over the world to be educated. So my father actually was sent to the United Kingdom. He went to do his undergraduate degree at the University of Wales. So my sister, who was the oldest, there are 5 of us, my sister was born in Liverpool, England, while my dad was doing his undergraduate degree. And then he was given the opportunity to do his PhD in Australia. And so he took my mom, took my sister, they moved to Australia. My older brother was born in Australia. And then they finally moved back to Ghana, where I was born, and my 2 younger brothers were born as well. But an interesting story about our name. My father was the first person in his village to go to college. And so he was the first person in his village to get his college degree. When he came back home, they played drums because the drums were an important part of our culture. And so the drums were beat in celebration for my dad. Our name, Wutoh, it's actually not a common name. It's not even a common name in Ghana, but it comes from our language. It actually comes from a word called Wutoh. And my uncle, my dad never told me this, but my uncle told me that what it means is owner of the drum or leader. So back in the days before there were telephones and there was email, that we would actually use the drums to send messages back and forth over distance. And so that's really where the name Wutoh comes from, owner of the drum or leader. And so the cutie on the right side is my mom. and her name was Valeria Stella Dunya. And so my mom is also from the Volta region, but she's from another town called Keta. And so one of the things we didn't mention about Ghana is there are a lot of different tribes in Ghana. My people are called the Ewe people who are from the Volta region. Rita's father is an Ashanti, and you've probably heard of the Ashanti tribe, and they're more in the central part of Ghana. Around Accra, the capital, the more predominant tribe are the Ga. So when you hear people say, I'm a Ga, they're from the central part towards Accra, and then the Fantis are really more towards Cape Coast, and we'll talk about that. My brother-in-law is a Fanti. So early on, tribalism was really important, and people tended to stay within their tribes. Thank God we're moving away from that. But one way to think about tribes is you can tell when someone here is from New York, or they're from Mississippi, or they're from LA. And how can you tell? You just hear them. You can tell somebody, oh, he's from the South. You know he's not from New York. Or you hear somebody, the way they talk, you know that they're from Boston. And so in addition to the way they talk, there are differences in the type of food that they might eat. You typically don't eat hog maws in Boston, right? and in LA, you may be more likely to eat like Tex-Mex or certain types of food. But it's sort of similar to that with tribes. And with tribes, we also tend to have our own languages that might be more specific to that tribal group. But English is the predominant language. Almost everybody speaks English in Ghana. So my parents met in the late 50s. My mom was a nurse, and the story is she had some friends in nursing school who wanted to introduce her to my dad. My dad's sister went to nursing school with my mom, and that's how they were introduced. Next slide. And so the good-looking fellow on the left side is my father-in-law. That's Rita's dad, and his name was Jude Edmund Edu, and he was from Ashanti Bekwai. So he was also a royal, and so her father was part of the royal family among the Ashantis. Her mother, I didn't have a picture of Rita's mom, but as I mentioned, her mother is from Charleston, South Carolina. The lady on the right side is my grandmother, Felicia Ape. Next slide. And so this past year, and we'll talk about different cultural things in Ghana and Africa. This past year, we went to visit Ghana, and the specific reason we went is because it was the 20th anniversary of my father's death, and it happened to also be the 20th anniversary of the passing of Rita's father. And so there are a lot of traditions that we do when someone passes. There's certain clothes that you wear. There's certain celebrations that you do. So one of the things that we did was we went back to my father's village, and we memorialized him and spent some time with my father's family. And the sign on top, that's the name of the village. It looks like Tan Yigby. We pronounce it Taingbe. And so it's about 10 miles from the regional capital. It's sort of like being 10 miles from the state capital, which is where the village is. And the picture on the right is me and my wife and our two daughters. And we have on black and white because that's the tradition for the 20-year memorial. You wear black and white. You don't have to keep wearing black, which is well, with our family, if someone passes, the traditional colors are black and red. And so you'll see at the funeral, everyone either has on black or red or some combination. And so there are colors even associated with as time passes, what is appropriate or not appropriate to wear. The next slide, please. Okay. This is a picture of the Wutohs in Taingbe. And so, as I said, Wutoh is actually not a very common name, even in Ghana. But that village is one place you'll just find a lot of Wutohs. And so this is a picture of some of my uncles, my dad's cousins, some of our other relatives. As we were doing the memorial service, we took a picture of and this isn't all of us, it's just a picture of the small group together. Next slide. Okay, I was going to talk about weddings. On the left side, the really slim guy, that actually is me. But that picture was actually taken here. We were married here as Central. And what you'll notice is that my father-in-law doesn't have on a suit. He has on kente cloth. If you're in Ghana, and what is traditional is that you'll wear kente cloth, and it can be really formal. If you've, what is that show? There's a show recently about Queen Elizabeth. I think it's called The Queen. And there are some scenes while she's in Ghana during the Ghanaian Independence Day, and she's dancing with Kwame Nkrumah. Some of the scenes, he doesn't have on a suit. He has on kente cloth because that's our tradition, especially for formal events. On the right side, that actually is from my parents' wedding. And what you'll notice in that picture is all of them have on kente. My dad has on kente cloth. My mom has on kente cloth. And the guy on the right, that's my grandfather. That's my father's father. And so they all were wearing kente because that's the traditional, and that's what we wear. So they're, and kente is very, not only is it traditional, but it's really, I won't say sacred, but there are, for example, certain types of kente that only certain people can wear. So there are certain types of kente that only the chief and the chief's family can wear. There are certain kentes that you can only wear to weddings and formal celebrations. So we kind of treat kente in a certain respectful way, if I could. Next slide. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about slavery because we were actually, my wife and I were watching a movie last night called Njinga. And has anyone seen Njinga? You should see it. It's actually about a black queen from Angola. And at the time in which she was reigning, they were fighting the Portuguese, who were there really trying to capture Africans and send them, in that case, to Brazil, because that's where they had a lot of the sugar plantations. But the Europeans really first came to Africa in the 1400s, 1500s in a big way. And initially, they really came for gold. They came for gold. They came for materials. They came for wealth. And then they started exchanging in slaves. And so this castle is on the coast of Africa. It's on the west coast of Ghana. This one happens to be called Cape Coast Castle. Is this Cape Coast or Elmina? Okay. It's either Cape Coast Castle or Elmina. But if you were in Ghana, there are actually a series of castles along the coast. There are like 10 or 12 of them going from one part of the country to the other. But they've been able to preserve this one, and I actually think this one is Elmina. And the reason I'm saying it's Elmina is a Portuguese word that means the mine. And so they named this town because they were mining for gold, and that's what they came initially to try to export. But when they realized that they could be in a much more lucrative trade in slaves, so when the castle was built, It was built because the Portuguese had convinced the chief in the area that they just wanted to trade in gold and that they wanted to trade in some of the other natural resources, and that they would be able to partner. It wasn't long after that that it really shifted from gold and material goods to slaves. And so they used to hold slaves in the castle, and then after they had accumulated a certain number of them, then they would ship them over to either here in North America or to South America and the Caribbean. Next slide. And so this is inside Elmina Castle, and I wasn't going to show a lot of photos, but once slaves were captured, they would typically be there for several weeks, up to a month or two, not treated well, not fed well, packed like sardines. And then when the time came for the ship to come to move them and bring them across the Atlantic, every slave would have to enter through that narrow opening, and so it's called the door of no return. Once you cross through that way, you were not coming back. And they intentionally, it's actually, you see how wide it looks from here? It was originally a wide passage because that's how they would move goods to the ships. They intentionally narrowed it because slaves would try to jump out or escape. So they intentionally made it so narrow that only one person could go through at a time, and you would have to squeeze through, which made it more difficult to escape. On the picture on the right, if you can't read it, what it says is female slave dungeon. Next slide. And so I wanted to just mention that and to talk about slavery, and we, hopefully we'll have time for questions and we'll be able to answer some questions. But I also wanted to make the point that Africa is also becoming a modern continent. So I just wanted to show you some pictures of, I have one of my mentors who taught at Howard, who's retired and moved back to Ghana, and he and his wife built this beautiful house in Accra, and you can see, the picture in the middle. It's really an outside patio that's sort of like is inside outside. Really beautiful. The picture on the right is one of the new universities in Ghana. That building was built, I think, within the last 5 years. And so there's a lot of growth and a lot of development taking place as well. Next slide. And so one of the things also wanted to share, just in talking about Christianity and mission work, there are a number of churches of Christ who are involved in mission work in Ghana in particular. PG, we have a congregation that we support in Ghana at the Asakori Church of Christ. Brother Collins, Jay, I know that there are brothers and sisters here who also have supported him. But we took a group from PG in 2018 to do a medical mission, and we donated some supplies and equipment. And so these are brothers and sisters from PG, as well as some of the brothers and sisters from that congregation. The picture on the right is the PG congregation. We were actually at the Museum of W.E.B. Du Bois. A lot of people don't realize W.E.B. Du Bois spent a lot of the last parts of his life in Ghana, and he's actually buried in Ghana, in Accra as well. Next slide. Again, these are, again, some brothers and sisters from the Asakori Church of Christ in Ghana, and the minister there is Brother Collins Ajay. Next slide. So again, if you don't see a lot of pictures of Africa, I wanted to make the point that Africa is beautiful. The picture at the top is not Ghana. It's actually a resort that my wife stayed in Mauritius. Mauritius is an island off of the east coast of Africa. It's absolutely beautiful. I mean, the water was crystal clear. The resort was fantastic. The food was really good. But the bottom picture is from Ghana. That's from my mom's village. I mentioned my mom is from a town called Keta. Unfortunately, because it's right on the Atlantic Ocean, there's been a lot of erosion of the land. So literally, the house my mom grew up in is completely under, that whole neighborhood is completely underwater, but it's a fishing town. And so that's just a picture of some of the fishing boats and palm trees and you know, some of the other things that you would see in Keta. Next slide. And again, just some of our food. One of the most popular foods in Ghana is jollof rice. If you've never had jollof rice, it's kind of like fried rice, just with more seasoning. It can be made with chicken, it can be made with beef, it can be made with goat meat, it can be made with fish. And so just some of the pictures, that's lobster, grilled lobster on the left. The next picture is actually Senegalese rice, teboujen, which is really where they think that jollof rice developed from. And then I was frying some plantain fritters. And so we'll take ripe plantain and we'll make a fritter batter from it and we'll fry it. And then that's just some seafood on the right. It's sort of like jollof rice with fish and shrimp, and there's a big king crab claw. I don't eat meat, and so most of the time I'm eating seafood. And then there's a pot of soup, and this is probably okra soup. Okra actually came from Ghana. One of the reasons why they took Africans and enslaved them was obviously for labor, but it's also because they were great farmers, and they used them to help domesticate a lot of the region in the South and in South America and Brazil and in Colombia and Argentina and in the Caribbean. And so a lot of the wealth from the agriculture is really because the Africans knew how to farm and helped to domesticate the land. But if you eat gumbo, if your family's from New Orleans or from the South, that really, I would argue, derived from African foods, because okra originally is from West Africa. Next slide. And I think this is the last slide. I just, one of the things, I mean, I don't think I can overstate how important family is in Ghana and in most parts of Africa. And respect for our elders is really big, is really huge. So the picture on the left is my mom. I can't remember what event that was, but it may have been from my father's 20th year because she has on black and white. The picture in the middle is my wife and I. Just wanted to show different types of outfits and clothing. At the top right was an 80th birthday. It's my mom's 80th birthday party. We had a white party for her in Ghana, and a lot of friends and family came to celebrate with her. And the bottom picture, that's actually me and my brothers. That's my sister is on the left. My older brother is on the beside my sister, and then that's one of our grandmothers. My younger brother is sitting on her lap, and I'm the little cute fella on the right side, just minding. That's probably the last time you would see me with hair in that picture. But I'll stop there. I really just wanted to use the photos and the pictures to help paint a picture and to tell a story. And I'll ask my wife if she wants to make any comments, and then we will be glad to answer any questions.
Okay. I was just going to say that my parents met at Howard University. my mom had a friend who introduced her to my dad, and so that's how they met, back, I guess, in the late 50s, I think. Or my sister were born 61, 63, so yeah, so they met in the 50s. But yeah, so I guess that sort of, Harvard was like a blending, or he's called the Mecca, so people were coming from everywhere in the world and mixing cultures. Oh, we met through a mutual friend too.
No, God is good, and so I'll have to tell you the whole story. I mentioned my father is from the Volta region, which is the eastern part of Ghana. Rita's father is from the Ashanti region, which is just a completely other part. But when my father was young, his father, my grandfather, moved them to a different part of the country, to the Ashanti region. So her father and my father actually were in elementary school together, and they knew each other in elementary school, but then when they became adults, they just went their own ways and separated. Her dad came to Howard. I mentioned that my dad went to England to go to school, and then my parents moved back to Ghana. Her parents stayed in the U.S., and I think you were born in Norfolk. Yeah, so fast forward, decades later, I had a friend. We had a mutual friend, again, whose father had passed, and so she had invited me to come to her house to pay my respects, and said, "Oh, by the way, she wants to introduce me to someone." And I was probably in my early 30s then, so everybody in my family was trying to get me married, and I was tired of meeting everyone they thought that I should get married to. I was like, it's okay, I'll come, but it's okay. And so when I got to the house, Rita was there with her dad. I was like, she looks familiar. And as it turned out, she went to medical school I went to pharmacy school at Maryland. She went to medical school a few years after me, but I had a younger brother who had kidney disease. And so she was actually, while she was in medical school, was part of the team that was actually checking and following up on him. And so when I started working at University of Maryland Hospital, I remember her coming into the pharmacy, and I didn't remember her face. I remembered her name. And I saw her name tag, and it said Ada. I'm like, oh, she's probably Ghanaian. Again, made nothing, thought of it again. So when we finally meet, we just start realizing all of these connections, that her father's best friend was actually my uncle, my father's younger brother. I mean, they were close friends, but we had never had that conversation or discussion. We find out that our sisters, her older sister and my sister had recently moved and literally lived a block away from her sister. And they had kids about the same age. And so the more we sort of started, it's like, oh, do you know such and such? Yeah, I know such and such. That's a good, so, the more things that we started talking about and connecting on, it's like, well, if this is God's will, if maybe this is what God is directing us to do, then so be it. But I wanted to one of the things I wanted to mention when I was showing the pictures of our wedding and my parents' wedding is in Ghana, in almost actually in all the tribes, before the wedding, there's what we call the engagement. And so the engagement is really the bigger deal. And so when we have the engagement, what takes place is that the guy who wants to marry the young lady has to present a dowry, a dowry which is typically, an amount of money and certain gifts to the family of the young woman. And so the families will meet, the young woman's family will meet, the young man's family will meet, and they'll actually literally almost, what's the word?
Check out the gifts.
Yeah, they'll check out the gifts, but more so than that, they'll start haggling. And so I will have a representative from my side, who's typically my cousin, and there'll be a representative for her side, and they'll present my case. Oh, Tony is a fine young man. He's a pharmacist. He's doing such and such and such and such. And of course, they're not gonna, they think that she's hot stuff too. So her family is gonna say, well, Rita has a degree as well, and she has a medical degree, and she can cook, and she can do these things. In the old days, what they're really trying to do is drive up the dowry. I've presented $500. No, it needs to be double. And you need to bring some clothes. And you need to bring some schnapps or some whiskey. And so there's a list of things that I would have to present to her family, and then her family will consider it. And at the end of the day, they'll make a decision whether or not I'm acceptable, and whether or not the gifts I've brought are acceptable. And then if they agree to accept them, that essentially means that the families are agreeing to join. So it's really less about the individuals. It's not really about me. It's not really about her. It's about the families agreeing to join together. And so in Ghana, the engagement can be considered the formal union. But most young people these days, after the engagement, they'll have what we call the white wedding. And so the white wedding is the wedding in the church. But the traditional union of those young people is during the engagement, if that makes sense. Okay. So I'll stop there if there are any questions for us. Yes. Did I bring? I know it's we're laughing. I was given a list. I was given a list of things that I need. So one, I needed to bring a Bible. I needed to bring the ring. I needed to bring a certain amount of kente cloth, other fabrics. And then drinks, so there were certain drinks that I had to provide, jewelry, money. So they sent me a list, and I was like, no problem. And so I purchased all the items on the list and then sent them to my family to present.
I have a statement before I have a question. Tony, this is Andre.
Yes, good to see you, Andre.
Good to see you. It's just so amazing in the power of evangelism. If we start with the Wutoh family, because Brother Rupert and I were talking about this, and through the campus ministry, Tony Goodman was who I was working with out at UMBC, and so as a result of that, here we are with
That's true.
With Brother Wutoh here now. And so I was a part of that ministry. And then, if you all don't know, Quentin Miles was also out at UMBC. And as a result of that campus ministry, we had introduced the gospel to him also. So as far as my questions are concerned, so I live in Bowie now, and I'm real good friends with Jason from Avalon Pharmacy. Are you familiar with him?
With what pharmacy?
Avalon.
Avalon.
Jason is his name.
Oh, McCarthy?
Yeah, I know.
Okay, I know Jason well.
Okay, all right, very good. The other question that I had was related to, I don't know. Go ahead, take someone else.
Okay.
Sister Murphy, did I see your hand?
I know you have an interesting tradition when it comes to naming your children, because I have three. One is Kwaku, and
Right.
other two names I can't even think of them right now. But you name them after the day of the week that they're born. Is that still in existence today?
Yeah, my middle name is Kwaku, and it means that I was born on Wednesday. And so we probably, I think all of the tribes still, most people still do that you will get a name based on the day of the week that you were born on. But there are other aspects to it as well. So my middle name is Kwaku, and my younger brother is also Kwaku because he was also born on Wednesday. But his full name is Kwaku Mensah. And so it distinguishes between him and me. My older brother is Jeff, and Jeff was born on a Thursday, so his name is Kobla. My youngest brother is also born on the same day of the week, but because he was the fourth born son, his name is Kobla Anani. And so the names have meaning. Our daughters, our oldest daughter is Nadia. Her middle name is Nyamiche, and she has that name because I asked my father-in-law to name her. Nyamiche means more precious than gold, and she was born on a Friday. So her name is Afua. So her full name is Nadia Nyamiche Afua Wutoh. Our youngest child is Naya, and Naya, I'm forgetting what day of the week they were born, but Naya's full name is Naya Senna, and because I asked my mother to name her since she was the second, and Senna means a similar thing in our language, means more precious than gold or gift from God. Naya Senna, and then her traditional name is Akua. Naya Senna Akua Wutoh. Yeah, so the names have specific meanings as well.
I was going to say, so there's I think there's also a variation in the tribal names too. So you have the basic days, but like the Ewe naming is a little bit different than the Shanti naming. And I'm learning still more and more that like for the Ewe, if you have twins, they have different names because they're, the first of the twin gets a certain name and the second one. So that was something that's different too. So there's more to it than just like the 7 days of the week, but it's very interesting.
I just wanted to ask, that food that was up there, you fixed that food?
The one on the right that had like the crab legs and the shrimp, and yeah, I made that. The other,
Wait, the soup. The soup you
I
made.
actually made the soup.
I think the crab, was that in Mauritius?
The crab? No, that was Ghana.
Oh, Ghana, okay, all right. All right.
Okay, all right. Y'all gonna make me prove I can cook now. So the picture on the far left is lobster. That's at a restaurant. The second picture is actually Senegalese rice. It's called teboujen. The fritters, the plantain fritters, I was cooking that. The rice and the seafood on the right, I also made that. And the soup, I made the soup. We had started trying to figure out that because we're both busy, if we make like a big pot of soup on the weekend, we can eat that during the week and don't have to stop and get junk food. And so I started making peanut butter soup, which is Ghanaian groundnut soup, or okra soup, or bean soup, or soup with vegetables and seafood in it. So I'll try and make something different every week just so we'll have something. It helped me lose weight just before COVID too, but then everything changed. Sure. The question was whether we'll invite people over. Yeah, of course.
Could you tell us about the rainy season over there? how long it rains?
Oh,
Months?
that's a good question. Yeah, Ghana, we don't have winter, and obviously it doesn't snow there. And so it's really the rainy season and the dry season. And so right now is the dry season, and it can get really hot. I mean, it can be in the 90s and the 100s. The rainy season will probably be, it used to be like maybe April, May, June, but because of climate change, it's also shifting. And so now it can go into July and sometimes into August. And these can be really heavy, the weather in Ghana is funny. It can rain really heavy and then it'll stop. And then the sun will come out and it'll be clear. But the rainy season traditionally has been like April, May, June, July now.
Thank you. Really enjoyed the presentation. First question is coming from Sister Foster. She would like to know how well did you know Brother Collins, or how well do you know Brother Collins? Our dear sister Noni Thompson, who's my aunt, her sister. She was just sharing that Brother Collins' middle child is named after
Noni.
Sister Thompson, Noni.
Sure, I know Brother Collins very well. We communicate by email. Actually, when I'm in Ghana, I've tried to make an effort to visit with him. When the congregation that PG is working with is his congregation, and so when we went in 2018 to do the medical mission, that was actually his congregation that those photos were from, and so I interact with him quite a bit.
She wants to know if you know the child Noni.
I do. We've met Noni before.
Okay. I had a question regarding the kente cloth. It became very popular in the U.S. Everybody was wearing kente cloth. I still have a piece from school. All the students graduating, we got kente cloth during our graduation. I heard that there was some dismay, I'll call it that, from our African brothers and sisters, feeling though there was a disrespect of the cloth.
Cultural appropriation, they would call it. Okay.
Even though we're Black Americans, we did not know. So is that still kind of the feeling, or?
No, I think that was true, because as I was saying, for us, kente is it's not just traditional. It really is, for many circumstances, formal. And so you don't just wear kente to anything, that there's certain events, and even in some circumstances, there's a certain kente that you only wear to certain events. So for many people, it was, sort of,
jarring.
Yeah, I mean, especially if it's not, if it's not done appropriately. I think most Ghanaians see it now that it's not being done in a way to be disrespectful, but you still, I'll give you an example. If you were in the military, you wouldn't want to see someone just wearing an American flag any old kind of way. Especially for people in the military, if someone just had a flag draped on them, or they had some shorts made from an American flag, they would just consider that completely disrespectful. And so it's sort of similar that you just have to be respectful of the way you wear the material. But I think most people, understand that it's not being done in a way to be disrespectful. And, it's sort of a way of trying to celebrate Africa. So if you go to Ghana, you can get kente in a lot of places now, in the markets, in the souvenir stores, and, probably the grocery stores. But if you really want to see how kente is made. There are certain villages that specialize in kente, and they will take you there. It's still weaved by hand, and it can take a long time to make the material, but it's, if someone was interested in really finding out more about it, there are ways that you could understand it from a cultural context.
I was just going to say that I guess it's more of the West Africa region that has more of the cloth and that sort of the culture. I've heard from people from South Africa saying that they don't have that same sort of sense of pride or that identity as far as with the fabric connected with, the weavers and the colors, or even if it's whether it's batiks or the other type of fabric, African fabric. So I guess really it was a fad, and it was sort of maybe too commercialized at a certain point, and where you had kente umbrellas and kente everything, from the bag, the tote, the this, the that, and then it sort of got too played out, and then it kind of quieted down, and now people are looking at different variations of it rather than the same, the red and gold kente that really had kind of exploded, basically. But so that is something that's more unique of West Africa, that they have that identity and that sort of cultural pride in the fabric and the textiles there, where Southern Africa, they don't. So they're just wearing they have some traditional, but they sort of almost admire or envy West Africa for having that that culture of the hand weaving and everything there.
Okay. What we're going to do is take one last question, and we'll be able to answer questions downstairs afterwards, all right? Sure. We're going to move on with the program. Derek is going to provide the last question.
Hey, you guys are very well educated. Your children are on their way to doing the same. Can you talk briefly about the importance of education in not only Ghanaian culture, but I believe most of African culture?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I was sort of alluding to that about my father. That in my father's generation, I'm trying to think how old. Okay, the University of Ghana, I think, just celebrated. It's either its 60th or its 75th anniversary, so they're not that old, where there's centuries or generations. So for a lot of Ghanaians, especially our father's generation, they were sent abroad to go to school. But just to give you an indication how important that was and what that meant, I mentioned when my father came back from finishing school, they had, the celebration of celebrations. They played the drum to announce that he was returning. The chief came out, and so my father, ushered in a generation of Ghanaians who would then, go from the village. So education is extremely important, and that, for the Wutohs in that village and for that area, that's what we have been known for. We're not necessarily businessmen. There are certain Ashantis are known to be businessmen, even though there certainly are a number of Ashantis who are getting educated as well. But in the same way, we realize here that education is really the key to helping to develop a people and helping to develop and make sure that young girls can move forward and move the traditions and move the people forward as well. It's extremely important for us. And if one of the things, if you go to Ghana now, one of the things you'll see, the earliest universities were Cape Coast, University of Cape Coast and University of Ghana. There's been 20 or 30 new universities that have popped up over the last 15 to 20 years just because of the huge demand and because so many young people want to be educated, know they need to be educated, want to be a part of what the changes and what's going to come next for them. But to the question that you're raising, it's extremely important.
I just wanted to add that I think we have maybe some cultural differences, even though, okay, Ghana was colonized, and here you had, slavery and everything as well. In America, there's still like, somehow children do not feel that they're not looking to education necessarily as the ticket out of poverty, where in Africa, that is the only way out of poverty, is education. So the kids really revere education. It's like a competitive thing. The kids amongst each other, the schoolboys or schoolgirls, how'd you do on that test? They're studying, they're encouraging each other, they compete against each other to get the highest score. And it starts in elementary school on up. And you say, yeah, primary school in Ghana, but anyway, elementary school, that level, starting very young, education is the way out of poverty. And even for the people like my dad, even though he was a royal, he was not rich. So very humble beginnings, and that he got a scholarship from the Cocoa Marketing Board to come actually to the US for school. So here, I think in America, it seems like we take it for granted. I think actually maybe it might be easier for girls, black girls, to excel or to be more studious than the black boys. It's just a cultural thing, but in Africa, it's different. And I think people basically are trying, they're hungry, they're like, we have libraries, free libraries. They're not as many, books are not as plentiful in different parts of Africa too. So, but whatever they can get, it's like they just try and extract everything out of it. Okay, so I think there's more of a respect for education and for books and for knowledge over there, and that really is the key of the way out. Yeah, fewer options.
Yeah, and I was just making the point with my wife that's also because there are fewer options. That there's, in the U.S., we take for granted that there's a safety net. That there is no safety net. So if you don't get it done, if you don't perform, even if you're, one of the sad things you can, in Ghana and other parts of Africa, you can meet kids who are brilliant. I mean, just absolutely brilliant. And if they don't have access, if their families can't afford to send them to school, because there's still a lot of places where education may only be free to 6th grade, or it may only be free to an 8th grade level, but you have to pay, or you have to find someone who can pay for you to complete high school or even to college. And so it is more competitive. And there is, in part because there are fewer options and there's no safety net. And so if you're not excelling academically and you don't have access, the likelihood that you're going to be able to climb out of poverty or be a great entrepreneur or think of that next $1 million app, those options just aren't as available in Ghana and in other parts of Africa as much as they're available here.
The other thing too, I think, is that the mission or Sister Noni sponsoring is again the opportunity for community service and giving back. So even though slavery brought us over here, in some ways we have a lot more benefits than people back in the motherland too. So I guess there's also the opportunity to give back and to do service, whether it's through ministry or different opportunities as well. So I think about that as well as a very important. And we don't take, sometimes I feel that kids here, maybe whether it's in high school or college should go to Africa to see how little people have, but how they try and maximize it out, because we have a lot of things here and people take it for granted and don't even respect what they do have. We could do more with what we have here than what we do.
All right, we want to thank you so much. Thank you for celebrating with us today. And brother and sister Wutoh, Dr. and Dr. Wutoh, Mr. and Mrs. Wutoh, this is just a wonderful experience. And we will take additional, they'll be downstairs and to answer additional questions. We ask that you stop by and see the exhibits and be sure to pick up your lunch before leaving. Just to bring this into the year 2023, the world without black people. We're going to have a presentation, and this will be the closing for our Black History program this year. The world without black people, presented by our young sisters. And then after that, Brother Kenneth Yule will be doing closing prayer.
We will honor Black History by the Department of Transportation. In honor of Black History Month, we are celebrating the contributions of Black legends in the history of transportation industry. Throughout the month, we will highlight Black pioneers that have paved the way for recognition of Black excellence and their historical contributions. Today, we recognize Isaac Johnson and Dr. Gladys West. Isaac Johnson is honored for being one of the first African American inventors to contribute the advancement of the cycling industry. In 1899, Mr. Johnson was the first Black man to patent a bicycle frame that could be folded or taken apart for easy storage. Mr. Johnson's version of the bicycle frame is similar to the version we ride today. Dr. Gladys is honored for her contributions to developing the Global Positioning System, GPS. Dr. West was the first to input all of our information on the Earth's movement and the forces that act upon it into a computer to create a precise mathematical model for our planet. She made it possible to create an accurate geodetic model to the Earth. GPS needs to take all the factors into announcement to work. Dr. West's computer program paved the way for pinpointing a person's location on the Earth throughout satellite tracking. It was this first that laid the foundations for the GPS that we all use today. We remember Dr. West and Mr. Johnson for laying the foundation for two essential tools that widely used in the transportation industry.
A World Without Black People. This is a story of a little boy named Theo, who woke up one morning and asked his mother, "Mom, what if there were no black people in the world?" Well, his mother thought about that for a moment and then said, "Son, follow me around today and let's just see what it would be like if there were no black people in the world." Mom said, "Now go get dressed and we will get started." Theo ran to his room, put his clothes on and shoes. His mother took one look at him and said, "Theo, where are your shoes?" "And those clothes are all wrinkled, son. I must iron them." However, when she reached for the ironing board, it was no longer there. You see, Sarah Boone, a black woman, invented the ironing board, and Jan E. Matzinger, a black man, invented the shoe-lasting machine. "Oh well," she said, "please go do something with your hair." Theo ran into his room to comb his hair, but her comb was not there. You see, Walter Sammons, a black man, invented the comb. Theo decided to just brush his hair, but the brush was gone. You see, Lydia O. Newman, a black female, invented the brush. Well, this was a sight: no shoes, wrinkled clothes, and hair a mess. Even Mom's hair, without the hair care inventions of Madam C.J. Walker. Well, you get the picture. Mom told Theo, "Let's go do our chores around the house and then take a trip to the grocery store." Theo's job was to sweep the floor. He swept and swept and swept. When he reached for the dustpan, it was not there. You see, Lloyd P. Wright, a black man, invented the dustpan. Thank you.
Beautiful. Brother Yule. Junior, yes. Okay, here he is. We want to remind you, we want to again thank you all for this celebrating with us week after week. We just love you, and we just know that we came from a rich history. There's so much that can even still be told about Africa. We just talked about the southwestern portion of it, and but we did it through the eyes of people you know. It's a real world. We came a long way, but we still have a long way to go until heaven is our home. We ask you all to continue to pray for us. Always celebrate Black history, not only just this month, but 365 days of the year. And realize where you came from. You came from rich heritage. You came from greatness. And we too are history for those who come behind us. And so just wanted to encourage you to let your light shine, to stop downstairs and visit the presentations and the exhibits that are here, to grab something to eat and take with you. Those who are wearing African attire, we just want you to come up front real quick for a quick photo with Brother and Sister Rupert and Brother and Sister Wutoh. Oh, okay. A little mouse is over here. No, I'm playing. Oh, okay. I'm rushing him. I'm sorry, I got one more presentation. We're going to do it in 2 minutes. We're going to ask Sister Judith Veal to come forward. As you know, last year, our Black History program celebrated with Brother Fred Gray. And we want you to know what part you played in that celebration last year and how we helped make history for that brother to be possible. And Sister Judith will speak first.
Can you hear me? Fred Gray receives Medal of Freedom. A lawyer by trade and a preacher at heart, church elder is presented with nation's highest civilian honor. Washington. Fred Gray was meeting with the Alabama State Bar Association at a retreat in Destin, Florida, when his phone rang. He told me that he had The famed civil rights attorney, still practicing law at age 91, answered. It was his son. He told me that he had somebody on the phone who wanted to talk with me, Gray said. Believe it or not, it was the president. Days later, Gray stood in the East Room of the White House as President Joe Biden placed a star-shaped medallion surrounded by tiny eagles around his neck. Gray, a longtime minister and elder for the Churches of Christ, was one of 17 recipients of the nation's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. When Dr. King, Rosa Parks, Claudette Colvin, and John Lewis, and other giants of our history needed a lawyer for their fight for freedom, you know who they called? They called a guy named Fred Gray. That's who they called. Biden told the room of family members, political dignitaries, and reporters. Near Gray sat fellow honorees, including gymnast Simone Biles and former U.S. Representative Gabrielle Giffords. Gray, the first civil rights attorney for Martin Luther King Jr., represented Colvin and Parks after they were arrested and charged with disorderly conduct for refusing to move to the back of a segregated bus in Montgomery, Alabama in the 1950s. Gray's legal brilliance and strategy desegregated schools and secured the right to vote, Biden said. As a minister, Gray imbued a righteous calling that touched the soul of our nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. May we all together stand for closing prayer. Got your mic? Mm-hmm. Speaking to the mic. Mm-hmm. Hold the mic to your mouth, yeah.
Let us pray. Dear God, thank you for the lesson that was taught this afternoon. May the things we learned that are used in our lives. Thank you to everyone that helped today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Sundays at Central make a difference in my life. in your life. Sundays at Central make a difference in my life, in my life.
The Central Church of Christ is a family-oriented congregation that believes that Jesus the Christ is the head of the church and that the Bible is right. We're comprised of a group of committed, imperfect people who are striving to walk with our Lord and Savior. Yes, Sundays at Central make a difference, but we want to ensure that we're impacting your daily lives. We're dedicated to making a difference not only in the lives of our church family, but also in our surrounding communities. Central offers several classes, ministries, and programs for people of all ages that we're confident will fit your needs. We'd love to show you why our congregation is the right church home for you. So stop on by and join us for worship service so that you can experience how Sundays at Central make a difference.
Welcome to Central Church of Christ, where Sundays at Central make a difference.